Okay, thank you for coming, and this will be the third session on the topic of destination safety and security. We will enjoy and learn a lot from the highlights or from the latest international tourism research, and we will do a little bit of research with you, with our audience first. And for the beginning of the discussion, Professor Dr. Jürgen Schmude from Munich will be giving an introductory presentation. The whole round will be moderated by Professor Dr. Harald Bechlana, and he is the president of AIEST, International Association of Scientific Experts in Tourism, and also professor for tourism at the Catholic University of Eichstätt, Ingolstadt. Safety and security are gaining importance, and we would like to pose now the question. You have this little remote control at your seat. Please read the question first, or I will read it for you. How well are tourists informed about travel safety, and who should be obligated to inform them? Please choose only one answer. Number one, unsatisfactory, politics should do much more. Number two, unsatisfactory, tour operators should do a lot more. Number three, it is sufficient already. Now, please press the button. Here is a mood picture for you, Professor Dr. Jürgen Schmude. Unsatisfactory, taking the majority, but quite similarly divided. The floor is yours.
Ja, schönen guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren. Safety and security.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Safety and security, that is a subject which is dominating at ITB this year. Now, we looked at the programs of previous years, and you see that safety and security is not really that new. In the past, we also had safety and security on our programs. However, the number of meetings and sessions was much lower. Here you see a number of sessions in the graph in 2017. The terms are used much more frequently. When we look at what safety and security included in previous years, in 2014, 15, and 16, the topics were relating to data security or gender issues, but or maybe the safety and security of business travelers. But now in 2017, for the first time, we are frequently asking about safety and security of tourists. When looking at the World Travel Trends report, we see the same development. The development we can now see in our programs of the meetings can also be seen in changes in tourism flows. I show you two charts about this. So the winners of the developments between January 2015 and 2016, no matter what source you use, the percentages are almost the same. There's very little variation, but you were also able to read it in the press. Greece, Spain, Italy, Bulgaria have been the winners. Tunisia, Egypt, and Turkey have lost tourists, and we only look at the German source market, by the way. So the number of tourists that travel to these countries from Germany has decreased. And if we look at the price changes, there are two countries that are among the winners, Portugal and Spain, in spite of getting higher prices or demanding higher prices in the market. The others have been characterized by decreasing their prices. Now, Turkey is a very important destination for Germans, and if we look at the development here in the first 5 months of 2015 and 2016, then this chart is probably familiar. And if we looked at the entire year, the average decline across the entire year would be plus minus 30%, depending on the sources you use. So there is a fluctuation between 28 and 32%. So there are destinations which are greatly affected by the safety and security issues. But this change in travel flows is relatively volatile. Destinations can relatively quickly recover if the frequency of attacks is not too high, and if the events are not too drastic. Now, if you look at the situation between January 2016 and January 2017, you can see the former crisis countries, Egypt, Greece, and also Tunisia, are now getting more tourists, the exception being Turkey, that still has declines. But the winners, Italy, Portugal, and Spain, have to reduce their profits somewhat compared to the previous year. What is remarkable is that price changes have been consistently in the positive, that is, prices have consistently increased. Now, progress in tourism research also means that we should ask what the scientists say. So we carried out a survey among 20 international colleagues, tourism experts that is, and we sent them some questions, and I will give you a selection from that questionnaire briefly in order to see what the tourism experts have to say. And this might then be a good starting point for our panel discussions with our colleagues here on stage. So the first question was about the timeline. That is, do you think that safety and security will continue to be an important topic for the tourism industry for a very long time? And among the 20 nota bene experts, with a response rate of 45%, this usually is a very high rate, but we only had 20 people. But you can interpret the answers, of course, because of the situation. So they answered safety and security have always been important issues for us in the past, not as important as today, but they will be with us also in the future. And the consequences resulting from that were listed as follows. There was a question about safety and security, which was considered the new norm by some of the respondents. But experts also pointed out that it depends on what market, what source market you're talking about. We have source markets that react much more sensitively, particularly the Asian market. And we also have source markets that do not react so sensitively. There was another question asked. Do you think that actors, that is, the providers of services in the tourism industry, are adequately prepared to handle the problem? And here the experts all agree that they are not. That is, there is no sufficient preparation. Of course, that also depends on the individual country and the responsibility of governments. And it also depends on more regularly informing tourists. This particularly applies to tour operators. And if we look at destinations, it was pointed out that destinations are mediators between different players. That is, the transport operators, the hotels, the leisure activity providers. And that obviously the guarantee for safety and security cannot be given by them, particularly because we have cross-border phenomena. And security issues do not stop at borders. Neither do tourists and terrorists. Another question was, what do customers expect from the tourism industry concerning safety and security? And in our discussion, we will hear what they have to say. That is, tourists expect 100% safety and security. This is an expectation which is basically impossible to fulfill. Nobody can guarantee 100% safety and security. And we also have to distinguish between different types of tourists. We have types of tourists that are more reluctant when it comes to risks, and then we have adventure tourists who are quite open when it comes to a certain degree of risk. It was also said that the providers should act much more proactively. So far, they have basically shown a reactive behavior in the market. And those who are planning and are designing tourism concepts will be more successful if they are more proactive. But there was also the opinion that tourists might need to be educated, that safety and security is an intrinsic element of traveling per se. There was another question. Do you think that the problem with safety and security will result in higher prices for tourist products? If safety and security and the services that have to be provided for safety and security in the background will lead to higher prices, what will be the situation? And here we have more diverse answers among our experts. There's a yes, there is a no, and there's somebody who says yes and no. What is very difficult, however, and this is also valued as a negative aspect, if certain services are correlated with certain prices. For example, room security costs €2, car security costs €2, and there would also be a fee at the airports to pay for safety and security measures. This would be very negative. This would be a no-go, and the tourism industry would not be well advised to implement such plans, that is, asking a specific price or surcharge for safety and security. So that was a brief sketch and overview of the results of our survey, and we would like to make use of these results to enter into a discussion with experts. This is a cooperation event between the TGT and IS. And now I'd like to ask my colleague, Mr. Harald Pechlaner, to come up on stage and to be the chair of this discussion. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Schmude. I would like to immediately start with our discussion. I would like to welcome you on behalf of IS and DGT and President Schmude. The theme and topic is known, and now I'd like to briefly ask my colleagues to come up on stage. We have Professor Dr. Wolfgang Aschauer, is a sociologist and works at Salzburg University. Then we have Ms. Yvonne Coulin. She is the managing director of the CDZ, the Congress and Tourism Center of the city of Nuremberg. Then Mr. Jan Frenzel, the associate director of EXOP, and is responsible for travel and project risks. He will also explain in a minute what that entails. And then we have Mr. Jürgen Neubart. He is a product manager and a managing director of Bayerische Pilgerbüro, that is a church tour operator. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Jürgen Schmude himself. Please come up on stage as well. Professor Schmude, he already gave us valuable input for the discussion, and it is quite fair that he also has a say in the discussion. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Nicola Zech. She is responsible for tourism studied at the IUBH Munich. So you see, the composition of the panel already shows that on the one hand, we act on behalf of the providers. This was also requested by the organizers. And of course, we try to combine topics which result from supply and demand aspects. But if I may, I would ask the first question to Mr. Frenzel. It is interesting that in Germany, we talk about security only. In English, it's safety and security. That is the physical and all other aspects of security. And what I would like to know is whether safety issues in destinations could be anticipated by information management, by observations, also by a critical attitude of players, by exchanging information in suitable networks. What is feasible? You are active with your company in this area, not exclusively in tourism, but I assume that we can learn a lot from you and the approaches of your organization. Well, thank you very much. Let me briefly introduce the topic. Safety and security in tourism is not the focus or the main focus of our company. We rather focus on business travel. In the panel discussions in recent years, this issue has been discussed at great length. What we do is we organize professional risk management in security. You already mentioned that there is a distinction between safety and security. Safety is usually avoidance of incidents and accidents. There is no intention behind it. Security focuses more on risks that could be intentional. That is, terrorism, civil offenses, and upheavals or other things. There are also natural disasters where there is no intention behind it, but there is a certain safety aspect and security aspect involved here. So what do? We analyze all kinds of security risks for business travelers abroad. The largest area being travel security, so we support large companies, also medium-sized enterprises, with preventive and accompanying proactive support services to make traveling safer and more secure. The differentiation between business travel and tourist travel is that business travelers are obliged to travel, and there's also a legal issue. An employer in Germany and internationally is required to look after the well-being of their employees abroad and during business trips. With respect to tourism, this is not so necessary. However, our recent discussions have shown that there is a need for that too. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Frenzel. We will come back to this question later on. I would now like to ask a question to Ms. Zech. Ms. Zech, you also conducted some research in this area. And I'd like to come back to the question whether through network management or information management vis-à-vis certain groups of players, issues of safety and safety threats can be anticipated. Well, thank you very much. I looked at the entire research area, particularly from the angle of hotel owners. What is done with respect to safety and security management and crisis management? And there are certain potentials for networking among stakeholders. There is hardly any destination for business or leisure travel where you can look at hotels in an isolated fashion. There might be some resorts that are physically isolated, but they are part of the tourism and destination system. So empirical research has shown that it makes sense and that all players involved and stakeholders consider it important that risks are analyzed in a proactive fashion, that scenario trainings, for example, are conducted with the police, with the hospitals, with destination managers, but that reality has shown that this is usually an exception. People are thinking about it, but they do not necessarily implement these plans. And what does that mean in practice? What do the companies or organizations do who are the exception? Well, they don't only have the typical manual for fire alarms, for example, but they also have further contacts that certain reaction chains are already established and that can be activated faster, so people don't have to look for a contact. It's also important that we look at health threats, for example, with the norovirus, that you can identify your suppliers more quickly and that you can also analyze their safety and security measures. So this goes beyond having a phone list and a safety plan. Okay, so one thing is a process plan or process chain, checklists, clear plans and management concepts, and that involves all potential situations and reactions, but the rest are values. Credibility, for example, that plays a very important role in destinations and among the players there. In a panel before this one, the audience was asked, who is more credible when it comes to a realistic assessment of the safety and security situation in the destination? The destination, the tour operator, or I don't trust either. The destination won Ms. Collin, and the next answer was I don't trust either, and then came the tour operator. So I start with the tour operator, Mr. Neubart. Now, looking at your organization, the church travel and pilgrim travel organization. Now, what is the importance of tour operators in combination with the destinations regarding credibility? Well, I think the credibility of the tour operator is important. If you look at the crisis region, the Holy Land, Israel, Palestine, where we are working intensively, where we have a large network. And you know, we work with agencies, local agencies in Palestine as well as in Israel. These aspects are important for our guests. We are also credible when we advise people on the phone, in meetings, etc., because we can tell them about our experiences. We can also work with testimonials of participants who come back from these trips. When planning these trips, we can already make sure beforehand that you don't visit the Temple Mountain in Jerusalem on Friday afternoon, because we have the know-how and because we have the local partners. And only because of these long-term relationships, we've been active in this field since 1955. People think we're credible. And particularly in critical destinations, people turn to the tour operator and do not want to organize different modules of their trip independently on the internet and then are afraid to travel. Do you have any experience with the challenge to regain confidence in connection with destinations you operate in? For example, are you operating in Egypt? Egypt is a good example. People notice that we reacted in the past. Egypt, Sinai is a very important area, and for us, the Moses Mountain is a premium destination. And in recent years, we have eliminated it from our program to show our guests that we are actively observing the situation. We, of course, had a decline in bookings because the most important attraction was taken out. But we will not operate our tours there before the region is considered safe. The information by the Foreign Office is always beating around the bush, northern or southern Sinai. People don't really know where things are there. And this does not create an atmosphere of credibility. So people ask us specifically. And although we might say, no, we are not organizing tours, and not even if you sign that you bear the entire risk. And that makes us credible. And we hope that when times are better, we will get more bookings again. Well, thank you very much. This brings us back to the same question. Now we go to the destination managers. Ms. Collin, we heard that obviously the information coming from the destinations with respect to issues of safety and security has a great credibility. Would you confirm that? And why? Well, I believe that the respondents, of course, believe that the destination knows much better what the situation is. For example, if you think of the events last year and visitors of 2.5 million, then of course the safety concepts of the destination become clear and visible, and we can also adjust them. In Nuremberg, for example, in the social media, we inform people about additional safety and security measures. So we believe that our guests are sure that the destination knows best, but the destination has to be aware of its responsibility. So if something happens, if we have incidents, we cannot wait until a customer asks us what the situation is. But I know I have to proactively inform them so customers feel informed and can decide whether they want to go to the Christkindlesmarkt in Nuremberg or not. Well, because you explicitly mentioned it, can I follow up with another question? What has been your experience immediately after the attack on the Christmas market in Berlin? Well, we were all very shocked, particularly also the people in the stalls. They were shocked that a Christmas market was affected. And the same evening, we redesigned safety and security measures with the Ministry of the Interior and the police. We intensified security measures and communicated that the next morning in the media and in the social media. And there were hardly any questions asked, and there were no cancellations of bookings. December 2016 was the most successful month ever when it comes to bookings in hotels, etc. Maybe tourists who decided to come to Nuremberg and to go to a Christmas market already had taken that decision, and people who might have spontaneously come might have cancelled their plans. But historically, December was a very successful month. But it's also due to our proactive information strategy. And we inform people through all information sources, not only the social media. And we have the same wording, even in our hotlines and in the press office of the city. The communication cycle is very well established, and that contributed to giving our guests good information. At least it was perceived as such. But 100% safety and security guarantee can, of course, not be given. But as a destination, we have to face up to our responsibility. And there is some catching up to do. I agree with you with respect to other suppliers. Destinations have a responsibility and experience with large events. Also, the conference organizers and PCOs. But the supply chain and the suppliers will have to improve their standards, also to be secure themselves and to be credible vis-à-vis customers.
Eine Brücke eventuell zu anderen Fragen sein.
Now let me ask a question which could be considered a bridge towards other questions. We differentiate. We see permanent or regular guests and newcomers. Nuremberg might be a special case here because you also have a lot of business tourism. But you might also have business travelers who come back in order to just spend a few days in the city. So might this aspect of safety and security play a role in this particular context and in your communication or marketing? Now, 70% of our guests are business travelers, which is due to the fact that companies and schools that take care of them, and actually we did not have any decrease in numbers last year. And then, of course, we have the trade shows and fairs, and these are regular events, and that's one of the reasons why the travelers return. But then the city as such has a reputation as a safe city in general. And that's an aspect we underline in our communication, of course. Ms. Tarschow, you are a sociologist and you've carried out a bit of research. In this field, what would be your conclusions so far? A very warm welcome from my side. I would like to come back to the idea of destination management and the immediate impact of attacks. I'm a sociologist. I'm an expert in the field of tourism sociology, and I have pondered the impact of terrorist attacks on tourism for quite some time. When I started working in this field 10 years ago, it was quite interesting to note that destination safety and security was not on the agenda at all. And I tried to carry out a bit of empirical research. I traveled to Tunisia, Egypt, and Spain in order to get the opinions of tourists in the regions, in order to compare their different attitudes. And I never thought that I would encounter the phenomenon of terrorism myself. But when I was in Bali in 2005, there was a terrorist attack, which gave me an opportunity to talk to tourists right there on the spot, right after the attack. And I could compare their attitude to what they had thought before. And of course, this is about emotions, and this is about irrational fears. And of course, people try to find places. They are feeling confidence in, that's the hotel in many cases. But then the overall destination image does not suffer any impact. So as far as Bali is concerned, people thought the same about the destination as such prior to the attacks and afterwards. I also tried to compare travelers to Salzburg and to other places a few years later, and there I could see major differences in the attitudes. And as far as Berlin is concerned, I'd like to say that it's extremely important to really control the media coverage and to be very positive right from the very first moment on. And you also need to refer to different markets differently in research. We talk about the distance hypotheses, and we know that tourists from Asia might see Europe as a dangerous spot, Europe as a whole, whereas local markets, of course, do differentiate and see individual regions. So nobody from Austria would decide to not travel to Bavaria just because of events that happen elsewhere. Let's say in Berlin, for example. So there are differences between the markets, and it's also the situation in the domestic or the source markets which matter. Because if you have experienced terrorism or political instability in your own country, you experience the same elsewhere in a different way from someone who comes from a very stable country. Now, Mr. Schmude, talking about Bavaria and surveys, results, and the discussions so far, what can you tell us? What would be the key aspect to be considered by suppliers, by travel agents, and tour operators and the tourism industry? I'd say there is not enough knowledge about the perception of the tourists. We distinguish alleged or felt security and real security, but that's a somewhat academic distinction. And we tried to shed a light at the situation as seen from the scientific point of view, and we try to kind of overcome this black box phenomenon. But of course, the question is, to what extent does information matter? And am I willing to be influenced by others or not? That's also about the individual attitude. On the other hand, we generalize. We often say the tourists or the destinations or destination. I mean, I'm very happy being an expert in the field of geography as well to hear that you distinguish or that you differentiate and don't talk about a whole region when you want to talk about the Sinai, for example, only. However, in people's minds, in their perception, these differences are often overlooked. So there are two key problems, I'd say: perception on the one hand and differentiation on the other. I'd like to come back to this aspect in order to hand over to Mr. Wrentzel. Are tourism companies well informed about the tourists' perception of the risk? We've heard so far that there is not enough knowledge about perception and the mindsets of the tourists. But I wonder, what are your experiences? You are not only working in the field of tourism. And we've also heard that the tourism industry can learn quite a bit from other industries. Now, we do see reactive processes, capacities, and capabilities of operators. And I think they act and react adequately, even proactively. There is a lot of evaluation, and there are also assessments of repatriations and other measures which are being carried out in the regions concerned. And yet, we should pursue a greater goal. I mean, this is not only about handling the situation once something happens, but there should be a threefold goal, so to speak. Minimize the risk, for example, by means of communication. Prevent things from happening during a trip. That's, for example, the consideration of the fact that it does not really make sense to travel on a Friday in the Holy Land in order to see sites. And certainly preparing processes and possibilities and having means available in order to cope with a situation if something happens. Because, of course, we have to deal with the problems there where they occur. You cannot avoid problems if you are in certain regions, but you can also act preventively, i.e. you can give information to the target groups in question in order to minimize the risk, in order to enhance their sensitivity, and in order to better equip them to deal with problems. And ultimately, security and safety management could also be used as a market argument or a marketing argument, and could be sold as a bonus, so to speak. Now, we tend to say that we learn from each other, and we differentiate implicit and explicit knowledge. And of course, we learn how to react in a given situation. However, we don't have many possibilities to really train what we have learned cannot really be applied in training situations. Or can it? I mean, how do we acquire the skills we need in order to deal with these problematic situations so that we can react adequately in a given situation? Well, I'd say that's an important module of the risk management of a company. Learning, training. Now, in the first phase of the rollout to a company, I feel often shocked when I realize that what is kept in terms of information in my database is very different from what people actually know. And often, two operators and others tell me, well, if the travelers knew what risks there are, they would not want to travel. But you can also use the argument of information and communication. Thank you. 3 brief questions. Freedom and security are arguments we often hear in political debates. In other words, if you want to be secure, you have to accept less freedom. That's an argument. Is it true? Well, it certainly depends on the risk. I mean, if I want to have security, do I have to isolate myself? Do I have to disappear, so to speak? What kind of risk are we dealing with? I'm not sure whether this is actually the right approach, because what has been said is true. If I know what risk there is or can be, I'm better equipped to deal with it. So in the long run, security and safety can be marketing arguments. We don't have to conceal the risk. We can talk about it. Let's get back to Mr. Neubart. Tour operators. It's been said that we need to consider different players at the destination, which includes the hospitality industry, hotels and others, and it also includes the travel agent and the tour operator who coordinates the service providers. So you are controlling a certain service chain. What about training the people along this chain? How do you provide the respective parties involved with the information they need so that they can react adequately? Well, it actually depends on the destination, and it depends on mentalities. You have to tell people how German people react, what they think, and what mindset or attitude they represent. I mean, look at Arab countries. For many people there, certain situations are normal situations, ordinary situations, but they are not normal for a German tourist. We always have people on the spot who know what the situation is and who have an idea of what European security and safety concepts are, but who can also react when something happens in a hotel, and they can explain what's going on. So it's normally not sufficient to just put a sign somewhere, but to really teach people what to do in a given situation. And that's the reason why we need partners in the countries concerned, because sometimes we might need to move people to another hotel, for example. And this is not about working with a partner who offers the cheapest price, but this is about working with partners you trust. When the second Intifada began, my Israeli partner called me and said, "Switch on CNN, watch the news, look what's happening, and please decide whether you want to have your group come over tomorrow or not." We can make financial offers to you as good as we can, and we do not want to exercise any pressure on you. And that's an excellent partnership, and that's what you need. So you need sustainable and durable partnerships. Now, my last question. Mrs. Kuhler, Johannes Meyer-Busch said it's about safety, security, and sympathy. He's the Studioso's CEO. So what do we have to do in order to not play the importance of safety and security down in our communication without ignoring our responsibility? Now, Germany is safe and secure, and I don't know, Mr. Schmude, whether you have carried out research in this field too, whether there are any studies about what people feel and how they feel in Germany. The question is, how do I communicate security and safety in a city which is hosting a big Christmas market? I wouldn't call it a marketing tool, but I would like to tell the tourist who decides to come to my city that everything is being done so that he or she can feel safe and secure. And I think this is an argument to show that safety and security must play a much more important role in the companies than it used to. And it's about sympathy. Now, safety, security as values, confidence, trust, and responsibility need to be combined, need to be connected in order to create a credible product. Ladies and gentlemen, together with my colleague Mr. Schmude, I would like to thank the panelists. We wanted to hear from the world of science and from practitioners in the field of tourism, and I hope we've managed to present you a number of interesting arguments and presentations, and I guess we will need this exchange also in the future in order to learn more and more. So together with the president of the DGB and the president of the EST, I would like to thank our members, also the members of the board who are here, and we're looking forward to upcoming discussions about the same